So I laid in bed day after day, week after week, wondering what I had done to put myself in this situation. And I'll tell you, some days I felt supremely depressed. Other days I felt angry. Other days I just felt flat out humiliated. In February of 2011, so the second month of my recovery, I'm laying in bed asking this question. Why? And all of a sudden I feel this warmth in my body and I feel a tingling that comes through. And I hear this voice. And the voice says, "Is this what you want?"
You're listening to the 7-Figure Leap podcast. We're here to leverage rich relationships and smart strategies to take your business to the next level. Here's your host, Dustin Rieckman.
Welcome back to the 7-Figure Leap podcast. Today's guest is a really special connection. And the way I know that is I had 3 people from my mastermind group who met Tim Francis, our special guest today. And within a few days after meeting him at a live event in Austin, Texas, I got 3 different messages saying, "You really got to meet Tim." And so Tim and I connected immediately, felt like kindred spirits, felt like old friends. He actually called me from the rehearsal dinner at his brother's wedding in Canada, which I felt honored that he carved out a little time for me. And the discussion got deep quick, but it also got very practical. And so I said, "Hey, I would love to keep talking to you. I'd love for you to go, do the toast for your brother. And then let's record this as a podcast because I know my audience is really going to benefit from everything you're sharing with me one-on-one." So Tim Francis, welcome to the podcast. I'd love to just turn it over to you, let you introduce yourself, tell a little bit about your backstory and why you do the work that you do at Great Assistant today.
I know time is valuable, so I'd like to actually start with 3 real quick strategies that anyone can use right away.
Let's pop in. Yeah, let's do it.
So everyone wants to know, what should I pay an assistant? And there's a huge market out there, $4 an hour to $40 an hour, really. The sweet spot is $22 to $25 US for a domestic assistant. Later in our conversation, I can get into how I arrived at that and why that's true. Secondly, everyone thinks so much about SOPs. Should I use them? Should I not? Typically, doesn't make a lot of sense to put a ton of effort into them until we're past 7 figures. Instead, an assistant supporting you and you just shooting Loom videos for them goes a very, very, very long way to right size the solution of teaching them how to do what you need them to do. And thirdly, and this is maybe one of the biggest of all, is please do not communicate with your assistant over email. Email is just such a wasteland of distraction for you, but it's also a wasteland of distraction for them. We want to get you over into a DM tool like a Slack or something like that. And even if it's just the 2 of you, and it feels a little silly to have some fancy DM tool for just 2 people, what it will do for your focus and productivity is absolutely amazing. So 3 quick strategies right off the top. You said I like practicality. There it is. I
love it. And as we will get into your story a little bit too, I have to say I feel very affirmed in this moment because I actually hired my first great assistant without the TM. Earlier this year, as before I met Tim, I definitely would now fully endorse Tim's process. And the good news is he had not shared these 3 strategies with me, but I've actually checked all 3 boxes. So my rate is right there with what I'm paying Tiffany, my awesome assistant. And we are just starting to get into some SOP things as we're crossing the 7-figure mark. But yeah, a lot of our legacy sort of things I want to convey that need to stick happen on Loom videos, and I created a Slack channel just for her. So I guess I'm doing things okay to get us out of the gate. So Tim, thanks for opening up with the firepower here, giving people some answers to questions that are, I'm sure, on their mind. A lot of our audience, as I shared with you before we started recording, are in this kind of early scale mode, 6-figure, looking to 7, wanting to hire like a really amazing assistant. Maybe you've had some false starts. I know you have your own story about false starts. So I'd love to turn it back to you and just give us like, how do you get to this pretty niche service? Like, what does Great Assistant do and why do you do it?
Yeah, when I was born in Canada, I didn't think I'd have an assistant company, right? I thought I'd be a pro hockey player. You know, I'm in the back of the classroom in third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade practicing my autograph for when I was going to be famous, right?
Awesome.
So, yeah, you betcha. So I failed 5 times in a row at getting an assistant. I'd gone overseas. I had paid $4 an hour. I had paid $20 an hour. I'd hired agencies. I had tried maybe not every possible variation, but I tried so many different variations and nothing seemed to work. So I'm going to take it back just a few years. In 2008, I thought I was on this awesome trajectory. I'd just been named one of my city's top 20 under 30. I'd raised a few $100,000 to invest in real estate. I was actually a touring drummer. My band had been asked to play at the Western Canadian Music Awards. Everything was looking awesome. I actually had 4 houses because of what I'd purchased and invested in.
Wow.
And then there was this 18-month window where it was nosedive after nosedive. So the real estate market crashed. I fell big time financially. I was actually $250,000 in debt before I knew it. Secondly, 20 minutes before my band goes on stage at the Western Canadian Music Awards, we break up in the band van. True story.
Oh my gosh. I don't think I caught that part of the story. That's crazy.
We still played the show, but man, I'm up there behind the drums looking out at the audience. The lights are beaming and the crowd's screaming, and there's agents and publishers, and everyone you wanted to be there was there, but I knew it was over. So I'm scanning the room, playing in this kind of like slow motion in an aquarium kind of feeling, Yeah. And my eyes fall to stage right, and I could see my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, my girlfriend. They were all there supporting us. We got them a little special spot up front. And to know that it was over and to have them there meant a lot to me. So the next day, I had a tough choice to make. Do I continue in the music industry or do I pivot? And the cool answer would have been, and I did get messaged by a few different bands like, hey, we heard you guys split up. Do you want to join us? I think actually they didn't think I was a great drummer. They just knew I was like very entrepreneurial and I would do all the hard work. We had sponsors
and gigs and sponsors and agents.
That's exactly an airplane, all the rest. So at any rate, the cool answer was, yeah, keep going with music. But what was in my heart was entrepreneurship. So I knew that if I was a top 1% drummer, I may still not make 6 figures. Yet if I was a top 1% entrepreneur, I would definitely be at 7 figures and above, right? Yep. So it was a real gut check. And right there at my dining room table, I decided to move on from music after playing for, I think it was like 15 years and playing professionally for 6. So in that moment, I'm like, okay, all right, entrepreneurship it is. Double down, get going even harder into real estate. Then the next big hammer falls, and that's the real estate crash. Lost all the money, lost the band. And it turns out in all this that one of my main mentor at the time, it turned out he was the lead promoter of a $12 million Ponzi scheme.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so his business partner on that ended up getting convicted in court, given a $225,000 fine, barred from holding securities for 25 years and left the country. Like, you can't make this stuff up, right? So at that point, I'm like, it can't get any worse than this, right? Like, what else could possibly happen? Lost the band, lost the houses, lost my, reputation in investing. And, thankfully my investors were very understanding. We worked things out. But it got worse. So on December the 26th, 2010, so Boxing Day up in Canada, I go to pick up my family, and I'm going to be the good son. I'm going to take them to West Edmonton Mall, which is even bigger than the Mall of America, right? Huge, 800 stores plus. It is battle royale to get parking spots. So I'm thinking for Boxing Day, I'm going to take my family. I'll drop them off the door, and I'll drive around for an hour and a half trying to find the golden ticket, a parking spot, right? And I have a bit of a limp as I'm walking into my mom's home. I didn't know why. She says, honey, pull up your pant leg. Like, what's going on here? And so I slowly roll up the cuff of my jeans, And she and I both were shocked with what we saw. It looked like I'd rolled my ankle playing basketball or something. It was like this puffy kind of grandma cankle. And and so then I look at the other leg, we roll up the other pant leg, and it's the same thing. She looks at me, she's like, there's no way you're going to walk around for 7 hours at West Edmonton Mall in this condition. So I stayed home at mom's house, and little did I know, 5 days later, at my own New Year's Eve party, I would not be able to even stand.
Wow.
I literally sat in a rolling office chair as my girlfriend danced and everyone had a great time, counting down to midnight. Went to see 3 doctors. They all, independent of each other, came to the same conclusion. They said, you have a very rare illness called erythema nodosum. When I asked how this happens, they said it's typically stress related. And I went, oh, yeah, I can see the clear connection. The band, the Ponzi scheme, the money, all of it. I asked them how long the time frame would be. They said, we have no timeline for you. This could be days, this could be weeks, this could be months. We don't know. So I moved back in with my parents for full-time care. And I had to choose between my mom putting a little bench inside the shower for me to sit down and bathe myself, or at 28 years old, having my mother give me a sponge bath in bed. Wow. To go from touring drummer, 4 houses, top 20 under 30. I was actually also a college varsity athlete. So to go from all of that to having the mobility of a 98-year-old was unbelievably upsetting. So I laid in bed day after day, week after week, wondering what I had done to put myself in this situation. And I'll tell you, some days I felt supremely depressed. Other days I felt angry. Other days I just felt flat out humiliated. In February of 2011, so the second month of my recovery, I'm laying in bed asking this question. Why? And all of a sudden I feel this warmth in my body, and I feel a tingling that comes through. And I hear this voice. And the voice says, is this what you want? And my brain went back to being at my dining room table, deciding on entrepreneurship and saying, yeah, I'm going to do this, right? And I don't know if a second went by or a minute went by or an hour went by. Time stood still. And that's when I heard a second voice. It was small. It was quiet. It was distant, way deep down inside of me. And it just said, yes. And in that moment, I felt this cascade of just realizations flood through me. One of the biggest ones was that I'd been chasing fame and fortune through rock and roll and real estate, when what I needed to be chasing was truth and mastery. And even if I was never rich, never famous, if all I got to do for the rest of my life is get 1% better at entrepreneurship with every week that goes by, that would be a life well lived. It was around that time that I saw a quote that chilled me to the bone that I would remember forever. And that quote is, hell is meeting the man I could have been. Meeting God that day, I deep in my heart believe that was the day I started to heal. That was the day that I was finally aligned with, call it divine truth or a spirit of service, the dharma of the human soul. And that was the day that I think, candidly, Dustin, I think my head finally got screwed on straight. Now, I had a couple inconveniences. Number one, I couldn't walk. And number two, I was $250,000 in debt, and I had no way to make money.
I was going to say, this isn't like, and then I walked out of bed and I had this new company and I live in Austin, Texas. Now, it wasn't quite that simple, but this was truly like the rock bottom moment, the transformational, just moment, I guess, in your whole career, but also in your, more importantly, in your life, both spiritually, physically, emotionally. So like, I do want to move on to the story. One thing I'm very curious about is, as you reflect on this is obviously a very pivotal moment. I'm sure you've thought a lot about it and probably talked a lot about it. What do you attribute those two voices? Was the first voice God and the second voice yours? When you answered yes, was that just you, but not even a conscious you? It was from deep within, sort of like the real essence of you, your spirit in a sense. We don't need to get into theology here, but I'm curious what you attribute those two voices to, because that's a really interesting part of your journey.
I guess it would depend on a person's spirituality. It could be one and the same if we are all the same source, if we are the divine breath of God. The way that I personified it, I would say yes, it was God, and then it was the true me deep down inside, under all the masks of wanting to be rich and famous and all the rest. The true me was there. So, and after seeing that quote that hell is meeting the man I could have been, I had some important decisions to make, like what business I'm going to go into. So I started a marketing agency because my friend had a really successful supplement company online. And I'm like, where do all these strangers come from that just give you their credit card on the internet? So he said, oh, yeah, this thing called Google AdWords. I was so broke, I couldn't afford to buy Perry Marshall's $97 ebook. So I stole it / pirated it / got the login from my buddy Mark. And I've since actually spoken with Perry on the stage, and I've apologized many times. And I've given him money, much bigger dollars for other programs. So, Perry and I are all cool. But yeah, I now had to decide, like, am I going to keep trying to hire overseas? Am I going to keep trying in the few years after my recovery? Am I going to keep trying this overseas thing? And it just kept failing. So I'm there with $250,000 debt and only $28,000 of revenue before hiring my first ever North American assistant, thinking, can I possibly afford this? And then the second kind of like perspective crashed in, which was, can I afford not to hire North American?
Yes.
And I had this shower thought. I'm standing in the shower. This is a writer downer for anyone who's listening, but not driving. If you're driving, just pull over and think about it later. Yeah, mental note. I'm standing in the shower after I fell over and over with an assistant. And I don't know why this floats into my brain, Dustin, but maybe it's the hot water in my neck or something, just divining the muse. And the question was absurd but productive. The question was, if I was legally bound to staying with my next assistant for 3 years, what would I do differently? And all of a sudden I was like, well, if I was stuck with my next assistant for 3 years, I would not hire overseas because I don't know what the politics and civil uprisings and electricity and all the instabilities of overseas might be like in the next 3 years. I probably wouldn't hire the first person who applies. I probably would generate more than 2 or 3 candidates. I'd do like 50 to 200. So I'm making this list, right? Long list of what I would do if I was stuck with an assistant for 3 years. Then I felt a little guilty. I'm like, that's a little negative. What if I flip that around? What if I flip it around to, what if I get to be with my next assistant for 3 years? And as I answer that question, the list is like, oh, well, I would never miss a weekly alignment meeting with them. Now, maybe reschedule if needed, but never miss it. I would design a real great onboarding process, so they felt a real warm welcome, like they'd arrived at a professional company, not some chaotic mess. I would want to know about them personally, the name of their dogs and kids and personal goals and all the rest. I'd invest into them, right? And there's another list of maybe 20 items. And I pushed myself back from my desk, Dustin, and I'm looking at these 2 lists, and I burst out laughing. Because you want to know what? I didn't do a damn thing from either of these 2 lists with my previous 5 failed hires. Eureka, no wonder it didn't work out. And that's when I learned that a long-term approach to say, I don't want to hire an assistant for 2 to 3 months. I want to hire them specifically for 2 to 3 years or longer.
Yeah.
So off I go. I I put together let's say a more enlightened hiring process. Keep in mind, still $28K of revenue and $250,000 in debt. And I put up my first ever job posting for an American assistant for American wages. I had 200 candidates apply. Of the 200 candidates apply, a former paralegal from Kokomo, Indiana, named Sarah, is the top candidate, and I hire her. Now, it's a little strange because she had never been an assistant before. She had never worked in a marketing company before, which is what I had. And she'd never worked online before. And I'm like, how could she possibly be the top result of 200 candidates? How can this be? By any measure, she's unqualified. And then I had this little voice in my head say, well, Tim, your hiring instincts haven't been particularly sharp so far.
Let's just go with it, right? Yeah.
Let's try something different, right? Dustin, what I didn't realize that I'd done, which I don't know if it's dumb luck or what, but I had designed a hiring process that addressed exactly the custom needs of getting an assistant that are completely unique to an assistant compared to hiring pretty much anyone else. The way I would describe it is shallow and broad versus narrow and deep. Okay. So if I'm hiring a salesperson, I definitely want them to have previous experience as a salesperson. I want them to know some kind of pipeline software, whether it's Pipedrive or something else.
Right.
I want them to know my industry. And are they a hunter or are they a farmer? Like they need to. There's a real narrow, and I couldn't give two hoots if they don't know how to process payroll or send an invoice. Right. Narrow and deep is the name of the game. An assistant is the only role I can really think of where that's actually the polar opposite of what matters most because of how I define this. Okay. So as I was laying in bed sick all those years ago, I realized every single one of my worst fears had come true. I'd lost the money. I'd lost the prestige. I'd lost the reputation. I'd lost the houses. I hadn't lost my family, thankfully. And I hadn't lost my girlfriend. God bless her for sticking with me. So those are blessings. I mean, for a young man at 28 years old, all the things that he's striving for evaporate. But then my hands touched my face and my chest, in my thighs and my arms, and I realized, but I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm not dead. I'm still sound of mind. I can still think. This game isn't over. Maybe this is just the beginning of the next chapter. And I realized that I'd lost every single one of these so-called assets that you would see on a balance sheet or what the bank would call an asset, yet I hadn't died. So what was the number one asset after all? That's when I realized the number one asset was me. And as long as I was in the game, I had a say in the matter. And I was also the person who had the most access to money and decision-making and people and networks and software. I probably even had a better laptop than whoever I might work with. Like, right now, let's be clear. I had a lot of access to money and people. It wasn't very much money and not a lot of people, but it was more than anyone I could hire.
Right.
And so I said, what would it look like? What would it look like if I optimized my day around how the number one asset can go and be in his zone of genius as much as freaking humanly possible? And well, okay, if that's the case, it's kind of like I want to be the surgeon in the room. How can I arrive at the surgery room and everything's already ready for me? I could come in, do my thing, and then leave the room and someone else can clean it up while I go to the next surgery room and the next one and the next one and the next one. That sounds like a pretty kick-ass day. Like, how do we make that happen, right? And for everyone who's taking notes, I define surgeon in the room tasks as anything that is strategy, high-level skill, or high-level access. For the surgeon, obviously the high-level skill is them doing the procedure. Strategy is going to be what procedure are we going to do given the injury or the illness, right? Also, after the surgery, there's some strategy. Is the recovery going well? Do we need to change the medication or do something different, right? The less obvious is high-level access.
Yep.
So the surgeon has high-level access to their medical license, so they can sign off on documents. They have high-level access to other surgeons, so they can ask for a second opinion if the MRI or the X-ray looks a little funky, right? As entrepreneurs, we got that exact same 3 buckets: strategy, high-level skill, high-level access. And if you were to do a time study on your day, and you circle anything that is not strategy, high-level skill, or high-level access, we got to figure out how to get that off your plate ASAP. Now, it may not be tomorrow. It might be progressive, one task here, one task there over time. But, that kind of mindset for, say, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, you would be astonished at how much picking up 15 minutes here and 10 minutes there and 20 minutes over here adds up.
I'd actually like to key on that just a little bit, because I was sort of nodding along. You're like, strategy, high-level skills, like, yeah. Everyone talks about that. And then you said high-level access. And that really got my antenna up, in part because I would say in my own journey, that's been so key. And I haven't always named it well, right? Like I might say network or relationships, but actually I really like the word access. Could you dive in a little bit more for now? We're talking just to entrepreneurs, many of which are coaches, consultants, some agency owners like you were at this time. What are some ways we can think about, I guess, valuing the access we have, but also like improving access? Because I think access is maybe it's the real differentiator out of those 3. It's the thing you said is kind of a little more subtle. And to me, it's the most powerful. I think when we talk about making a 7-figure leap or a 10x leap, it's always about people. And, that's how we met, is through this like proximity principle and access in a sense. So I'd love to just camp out here just for a minute and talk about what you mean by high level access, and maybe some more creative ways we could think about that. If we did have this freed up time, what could we be leveraging it against when it comes to high level access?
So I was in one of Perry Marshall's workshops long after this is when I was paying for his programs. Yeah. It's in Chicago, Oak Park, actually, I think. Yeah. And I'm looking around the room and I'm like, oh my word. I am the dumbest guy on any possible topic here. Like, I'm a good all around marketing guy. I know AdWords, at least at a basic level. I know landing pages. I know opt-ins. I know email marketing. I know, like, I'm a good all-around athlete. But in the room is like a guy who beat eHarmony as a solo PPC guy. He smashed eHarmony, and they had a team of like 25 people. And then I look to my left, and there's literally one of the most iconic copywriters. If I said his name, you'd be like, oh my word, he was in the room. And then I'm looking in front of me, and it's literally the guy who taught Perry AdWords. I'm like, I am walking around like a one-eyed guy in the land of the seeing here. So the lunchtime comes, and I notice that across the hallway, I don't remember exactly who was there, but it was like the Insurance Adjusters of America or something, because we're in this hotel conference room. Sure. Across the hallway, different ballroom. And it dawns on me, I could walk into that room. These people wouldn't have a damn idea how to install WordPress. You know what I mean? Right. And that's when it hits me that in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And so Perry's room's wonderful for friendship and, peer support and, trading ideas and talking shop. Pretty bad place for a guy who's in the bottom quartile on any given skill to try and find clients. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, 1, how can I be the one-eyed man in the land of the blind? And 2, what is the most expensive room I can afford? In 3, an industry that I understand. Now, here I'd gone through the ringer with real estate investing, and there was this one particular investing club, Dustin, $300 per meeting. It was an annual membership of $3,500. They did have a couple kind of like weekend workshops, but to me, it sure felt like $300 for a 4-hour meeting once a month. And I stride in there, and I'm telling you, within minutes, they think I'm a genius. So, and I had some good skills, and I knew the industry, and I had some track record. And of course, it made a lot of sense for them to feel inspired and motivated and helped, just from at the water stand at the back or on lunch break, just talking about what it is each other does. By the end of the very first meeting, the president of the whole club says, "We got to talk." And I'm thinking, oh my word, like if he decides to have me speak to his group or something, now I have like hundreds of potential customers immediately. And by the third meeting, there was someone who owned some apartment buildings that said, "Hey, I've got a project in mind that's going to need some marketing. Would you be interested in having a chat about that?" Well, it turns out that I landed my first ever $28,000 marketing contract, right? So I would have never had that kind of access had I not had the time to shake the hands, learn the skills, make the money to be able to afford a $300 per meeting kind of club. And I've just repeated that over and over again. When I first moved to Austin, Texas, I knew 3 people in Austin. I started hosting private dinners. I had 8 new entrepreneurs and investors every other week for 2.5 years.
Wow, that's awesome.
So I ended up having dinner with 400 different entrepreneurs and investors. Pandemic hit, that shut that down. When pandemic started to lift, my business partner on that, his name's Tan, amazing guy over at asianefficiency.com. We decided to start hosting larger format socials. So we started hosting these larger format socials, 400 people, 500 people, 800 people start coming to these things. We get a DM after one of the parties, and they always had a theme, right? So the one party was like a Miami style white party. Everyone's dressing in all white. And one of them was called Fire and Ice, Boys in Blue, Girls in Red. And this is all online. I mean, you can go to Instagram.com/T&T present. You can watch the videos.
Love it.
Yep. And we get this DM from one of our attendees. She says, "Hey, you guys don't really know me, but I was at your Fire and Ice party. I've lived in Austin my whole life. It was the best party I've ever been to. I'm doing an event related to the United Nations. I need someone to design the VIP social. Could you guys help me with that?" I look at Dan. I'm like, "Yeah,
Of course.
And in the room at that VIP social was like billionaire families. Like it was unbelievable, right? And as we're getting ready for that event, one of Gary Vaynerchuk's business partners moves to Austin. And he's asking around, who should I know downtown, right? And he hears about these dinners that this Tim and Tan guys are doing. And he hears about these socials, and there's this white party and this Fire and Ice. And so he comes to one of our events, approaches us, shakes our hand, and just says like, "Hey, can we talk?" And I'm like, "Sure." So we have coffee with them a few days later. I actually don't drink coffee. I had a fruit juice. I'm not Mormon. I've just never needed it. Clearly, I've got enough energy,
That's awesome.
And basically he says, I want to bring Gary to town. I am, new to town myself. So I just don't know, like, what should I do with him throughout the day? This isn't a media tour. This isn't a book tour. This isn't a speaking tour. This is a quiet networking opportunity for him to get to know more people in the city. Could you help me? And at one point I looked at him and I just said, "Do you want us to just plan the whole thing for you?" He's like, "I would really like that." So he basically just gave us Gary for the day. He said, "I'll give you Gary from something like 10 a.m. until 10 p.m. You can do anything you want, anywhere you want, with anyone you want." So Tan and I, we end up getting Gary lunch with the CEO of Whole Foods.
Wow.
91,000 employees, $17 billion in revenue. On one side of the table, his name's Jason. On the other side of the table is Gary. And then Tan and I are just sitting there having lunch with him. Incredible, right? Incredible. by the end of the night, we done a handful of different events and whatnot. The final event was a 60-person hand selected invitation only group dinner. And at one point, I look at Tan and I'm just like, dude, if a bomb fell on this room, I mean, like the assets under management had to be well beyond $50 billion, maybe 100. I don't know. But I'm telling you, Dustin, had a bomb fall in that room, like literally the stock market would have had a little like blip in it, So, that high level access is just such a rapid accelerator. And my assistant has just been so key at every single step along the way. Because she's in North America, she has the cultural intuition. There's no issues with language. She can easily talk to high level people. She's the one, every time I'm interviewed for different platforms or whatnot, she'll oftentimes work with the show producer or whatnot to get everything fully prepared. So guess what? I can be the surgeon in the room.
Absolutely.
Right? And in the meantime, you, Dustin, and me, Tim, we have high level access to each other. We are the surgeons. You can text me like, hey man, what do you think about this? Or, hey, I'm coming to town. Who should I meet? Like, and the speed with which things can happen is just remarkable. So I think just the other day I had a client ask me, should I hand off my bank account? Should I hand off my email inbox? Should I hand off my passport? And I think it's a very personal question. I actually answered it's on our Great Assistant YouTube channel. It's called Get a Great Assistant is the YouTube channel. And there's I think a lot of fear for entrepreneurs, my former self included, around topics like inbox, calendar, and giving access to our assistant to all of that. And I think, hey, if we're gonna looking at the downside of what could happen if we hand off our, bank account, let's say, if we're going to take stock of the downsides, we also have to look at what are the downsides if I don't hand off my inbox, I don't hand off my bank account, my passport. And that's another form of access, right? If my assistant doesn't have my passport, she can't book flights or check me in. If my assistant can't get limited access, I'll be clear about that. It's not black and white. There's shades of gray, limited access to my bank accounts. She can't download bank statements and send them to the bookkeeper. She can't set up ACH transfers and other wires on my behalf. And I'm stuck doing all that stuff. So there is a trade-off, and everyone's going to make their own decision on what that looks like between the access we give our assistant and the freedom that we can have. Okay. Yeah. So I think also the last thing I'll just share on this is that I think every choice in business involves risk management. Who do I hire? What clients do I take on? What do I offer in the marketplace? And so there's no such thing as zero risk. Sitting at home doing nothing carries a risk of atrophying muscles and no physical activity, and we get sick, right? So it's about risk management. And I oftentimes think about what would have to be true for me to take this from feeling terrifying, like I'm going to jump the Grand Canyon, to how can I reduce that down to feeling like I'm just jumping over a pool, but then how can I reduce that down even more so it feels like stepping over a sidewalk crack? Maybe I might stub my toe, but if I do and I fall, I might skin a knee, but it's not going to be fatal per se, right? And so when I ask myself that question, what would have to be true such that this feels digestible? I went, once again, well, if I'm thinking about a credit card and a passport and a bank account, I don't know that someone from Pakistan, Venezuela, Philippines, India, is who I want to be working with on this part. Not because of them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Not because of them.
I think that's an important thing. This is not a value judgment against the people born in other countries. It's that, as you're going to enumerate, it's literally a risk. It's a risk mitigation consideration in who you entrust. It's
the environment they're in.
Exactly.
My first ever assistant who I failed with was in India. Unbelievable person, like college educated, that spectacular British English accent.
Yeah.
Totally dedicated and committed to me. We're still friends on Facebook to this day. We still wish each other happy birthday. Amazing human being. And then one day she disappeared. And I'm like, what happened? Like it went from full blast to zero, right? A week goes by. I don't know if she's quit or died, literally. And then I get this flurry of apologetic messages on Skype that tells you how long ago this was, right?
Yeah.
And via email. And she's just like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm like, oh, what happened? You okay? And she's like, yeah, well, there was a corrupt politician that had the electricity turned off to my neighborhood.
Wow.
He was trying to strong arm us into voting our representative out or something like that. And that's when it dawned on me, I could absolutely trust her, but neither her nor I could trust the environment she was in. I don't know how to navigate bribes and whatnot to be able to get things done in third world countries or developing nations. I'm not sure what the proper way is to say that these days. What I do know is I sure know how to navigate the US of A. I know how to navigate Canada. It's one flight for me to get to wherever I need to go, maybe two. And that kind of structural safety really allows me to relax my brain on sharing the more sensitive parts of my life for my assistant to help me with.
That's great. Yeah, and you preemptively answered a question I was going to ask, which is why domestic? If you're, I guess if you're listening in India, this isn't domestic, but why North America for a North American based entrepreneur? And I think you hit a lot of those key points. I do want to give a little time here before we run out of time to talk more high level about what you actually do at Great Assistant, so people can have an appreciation for that. But I feel compelled. I wrote it down, underlined it 4 times, and circled it. I love this analogy. I feel like if an insight I've definitely gained from this conversation, Tim, is the value of access and specifically in light of freeing up your time, like your time and your attention, right? If you're constantly on your own hamster wheel of tasks, even if they're in the other two, even if you're able to think very strategically, even if you're very skilled at what you do, if you're not employing that third leg of the stool, which is high level access, like what a loss of opportunity, what an opportunity cost in doing that. And so the thing I wrote down was like, be a one-eyed man in the land of the blind. When you talked about being in that initial room and you're like, it's like having one eye and this, all these people that can see 20/20. I was like, I don't really get that. But then you're like, but then I looked across the hall, and even with my one eye, meaning I'm not the most skilled person in this original room, if I simply put myself in a different room, all of a sudden I can actually thrive. I can get clients. I can actually be seen as effectively, a genius in this area and just across the hall, I was kind of a dunce. I think that's super powerful if people think about where to spend their time and attention. If you're thinking about even something as practical as like, which room should I be in? Which conferences should I attend? I think a lot of us, not everyone listening is a marketer, but a lot of us are, we tend to think, I need to go to the marketing conference, need to learn the latest skill, right? I need to learn some more strategy. And there is the value of some access in that room. But what if you took that same 2 days and you went to this other forum where you're like the marketer in the room and you could really serve people? And I did not do this intentionally, but I was reflecting back at some places I've spoken. I was like, man, I spoke at Story Brand Summit, and very smart people, way more skilled than me at things like copywriting, website design, even storytelling. But I got to speak there about the power of podcasting as a channel. And I got like so many clients because this whole podcasting thing was completely foreign to them. And it was like, wow, you're a genius. You know how to do podcast guesting. And like, this is actually pretty simple. And in a different room, I would look like, a beginner. And then even I'm thinking about, I was in PodFest, which, is a podcasting conference, yet I spoke about monetization, which was something no one was talking about, right? I'm like, hey, podcasting is great. There's a cool community, that it can be a great hobby. That's what a lot of people there are kind of experts in, quote unquote. But I'm like, you should actually make money with this effort. And here's how to grow a business with your podcast or by being a podcast guest. And I got a bunch of clients. And it was like, it's even in a room of people that are actually way better than me at podcasting, because I talked about the thing that is my surgical expertise, like, marketing, monetization, depending on which room you're in, the thing that you focus on wanting access to, super, super powerful concept. You really got my wheels turning with that. So I hope people don't miss that. I think the one-eyed man in the land of the blind is an extremely powerful framework for thinking about how to spend your time and attention, especially if you're in a growth mode and you're looking to get clients. Like that's really, really a fresh way to think about access. It's not just about how do I get access to the person who's better to the next level surgeon. That's cool. But what if you're the only surgeon in a room of wounded people who really need your help? Like how much better is that? So that's an awesome analogy. So Tim, we got, maybe 9 minutes here. So I just want to kind of hand it back to you. You've told us a lot about why, and you've given us right out of the bat some great strategies, answered some of these questions that a lot of people have about like how to get started, why hire domestically. But like, what do you do at Great Assistant? I don't want to miss the opportunity to kind of showcase the work that you do and what's the actual service you provide.
Yeah. Well, I out of a desire to be responsible about how I show up here. I'll just add that I don't actually think a US or Canada assistant is the right answer for all entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Yep.
I think every entrepreneur, though, should hire someone from a similar same time zone, language, and business culture because it solves so many misunderstandings, miscommunications, reliability issues, et cetera,
It's a great
similar
distinction.
same time zone, language, and business culture. So if you are in, I don't know, Australia or New Zealand, don't hire the US or Canada. Hire
Right.
Australia or New Zealand. If you're in US and Canada, don't hire Australia or New Zealand. Hire US or Canada. If you're in England, do it, whatever the corollary is of that, right?
Sure.
So I think that was such a huge breakthrough for me. I also think in terms of odds, like how can I stack the best odds of the right assistant with the best odds of onboarding, with the best odds of hiring, with the best odds of how I delegate, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I think that this is a very doable endeavor. The challenge is oftentimes you just don't have the time
Right.
to devise the right hiring funnel like I had done. We don't have the time to look at 50 to 200 candidates. We don't have the time to figure out what to delegate in what order and all the rest. So after I'd failed with so many assistants, I decided that I'm going to start doing this for other people. And part of that came because all my friends saw my income go from 28 in the first 5 years I had my assistant. I went from $28,000 to I think it was like $637,000 in revenue in 5 years. I'm telling you, if someone's a good marketer, which I'm not, they'd go a lot even faster than that. But
Sure.
that was life changing. False start, flip my mindset, bing, bang, boom, 20x income or whatever, 30x, whatever that number is. And my friends noticed. They're like, hey, man, you seem to be like traveling to some fancier places and you're going to like expensive conferences now where it's like 10 grand for the weekend and $30,000 a year and all the rest. Like, what changed? You're a little less pale, like you're getting some sun, And I was like, oh, well, Sarah happened. They're like, okay, tell us more about Sarah. So I tell them more. They're like, well, do you think you could do it for me? I'm like, sure. So I end up doing this cohort of 10 entrepreneurs. I'm like, pilot program. Let's see if we can get you a great assistant. Let's see if my systems I used for me would work for you. Sure enough, totally works. Every single one of them gets a great assistant. In fact, one of them, Adrienne, just messaged me the other day. 9 years later, still has that same assistant,
Oh, that's
which
awesome.
talk about like a testimony for long-term. Such a great hack is go for long-term. And pretty soon it's like, wow, I have more people asking me about getting them an assistant than helping them with marketing services. I'm not one to fight a paycheck. So I faded out Tim Francis marketing and I just did more and more of greatassistant.com. And, here I stand today shocked that we've now helped hire over 750. In fact, I think we may have just crossed 800 hires. Our long-term stick rate is an astonishing 96%.
Wow.
So that's like, how long does an assistant stick with an entrepreneur for like more than a year, not just a month? We've looked at 50,000 candidates. It's been an unbelievable ride. And I've been so humbled to also look at like Pete Vargas has 7 assistants from us. Russ Rufino has 7 assistants from us. There's one of the coaches at Strategic Coach has an assistant with us who's been with her for 5 years. It's just been super humbling. I didn't set out to do all of this. I lived by a decision-making guideline. I call it a DMG that I invented many years. Another famous shower thought was let demand drive decision-making.
Yes.
And I've just come from this new place ever since I talked to God, this new place of like, how can I pursue truth and mastery? How can I be of service where I'm called? And I've just been put one foot in front of the other for I don't know what it's been, I guess since 2011 was when I recovered. And I guess to put everyone's mind at ease, I did regain the ability to walk. It was 3 months of not being able to walk. There's been some low lows and some high highs along the way, but I do love the expression. I love the expression that a skilled sailor is not made in safe harbors. We say we want to be good at all these different things. It's like, okay, then we got to put in the reps and develop the resilience around that. So, ultimately, I don't think it's about getting an assistant, as much as that may sound strange. And I actually don't even think it's about getting our time back. I think it's about fulfilling our potential in this lifetime. And that's never going to happen if we're spending all day in our email inbox or buried in other minutiae, let's call it.
Yes. Beautifully said. I love that. So to close up, I think we've got a good feel for who you are and what you do. And basically Great Assistant helps you acquire or places you with an amazing assistant that's custom tailored to the needs of your business. So what are the first steps if someone's like, man, this is awesome. I like Tim. I love this story. He has really shown me the light that in this three-legged stool of strategy, skill, and access. Like there's a lot more work I could be doing if I was just freed up, if I just had this right-hand person as a great assistant. What is the next step for someone, Tim, to take on that journey?
So if you head over to greatassistant.com, you're welcome to book a discovery call. There is such thing as getting an assistant too soon. Yeah. We're happy to talk to you to figure out if it's too soon. And we're happy to talk about, what makes sense to delegate first versus what should wait a little bit longer. I think that entrepreneurs are some of the most fantastic people. And sometimes our eyes get a little bigger than our stomach. And sometimes we just don't know because no one ever taught me. No one taught me how to delegate, right? And so head over to greatassistant.com, book a discovery call. I soon have a book coming out. So opt in for a tool or two off our website. We can keep you up to speed on when that's coming out. It'll be probably an early 2025 release. And furthermore, if a person already has an assistant and you're like, am I the issue? Is it the assistant? You're also welcome to book a call. I'm happy to do a little bit of a diagnostic conversation with you to see where you might be able to up-level your leadership, or if in fact it's you, not me kind of conversation, if you know what I mean.
Awesome. But you're going to get the real deal. You're going to get the honest assessment from Tim and his team at Great Assistant. So yeah, go to greatassistant.com. Book a call. At the very least, go get on their email list so you know when Tim's book drops. I'm sure you can tell from the stories he shared here and some of these just great insights. I think that's really the big takeaway I have today is just like full of insights. I knew a lot. I knew Tim a bit, and I knew a lot of his story. I knew what they do at Great Assistant. I've been through this process myself, and gosh, I wish I would have known Tim, 6 months ago. I ended up in a great place, but it was a very painful, expensive process to do on my own. I did not know there was this who that I was going to meet only a few months later. So if I had to rewind the clock a little bit, I would definitely be using Tim over at Great Assistant. And there may be future assistants coming. It was encouraging to hear some of these guys and gals have 7 assistants. There's different roles that they're filling. So I may be back for this same strategy call myself, Tim. So Tim Francis, you're amazing, man. Look forward to continuing our conversation, getting to know you in a deeper way. In the meantime, anyone listening, go to greatassistant.com, book a call, get on the email list, and we'll see you back here next time on the 7 Figure Leap podcast.